go.
Hi, guys.
Okay.
Is my mic good?
Mic good? Okay. I want to start by sort of setting some context about storytelling. I love very, very, very much that we are in a room called Solutions House. And I want to remind us all, we are here at Climate Week, and there are rooms all over this city full of people who are deeply curious about solutions. Not problems, but what are the solutions and how can we be part of that solution? And a big part of that is the motto that I love on everybody's hat, which is fuck doom, right? We get to choose to not play that game. And storytelling is choosing the story we want to tell. That's what we do as artists. And that's what we do with policy. I feel like this is a really exciting conversation because we're putting together those two things. So I'm gonna do things a little different. Instead of reading people's bios, I'm gonna ask you, Katie, I'm so excited, who just took her job 2 weeks ago, to tell the story of how you got here today. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Katie, and give us, a couple of highlights about climate and what your dream in this new position is.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Alysia. That is an incredible opportunity. Look, I grew up in Yorkshire, in the north of England. My dad was in the car industry and I loved cars, okay? I loved animals too, but I definitely wasn't in a political household or in a household where anyone had any idea about environmentalism. I actually came to the US, I got a scholarship to come and work on Capitol Hill. And the great thing about being in America is you can sort of ask anything. And I've got a sort of slightly northern brass neck. And so I would say, can I come and work for you? Can I come and see? So I went to shadow Greenpeace and the United Nations Environment Program. And I was like, and they were like, there's this thing happening, it's called climate change. This is 25 years ago. And, it's a really big deal. And I was like, I felt like I'd sort of discovered this message in a bottle. Like I was like, oh my goodness, I have found this message in a bottle. I need to do something about it. And so I went to, I thought, I'm going to go work on this. It'll be sorted in a couple of years, all be fine. And I can go and work on it, and then I can go do something else. So that was the plan. I went to work at Friends of the Earth. I got a job. I walked in, and my now good friend was my boss, and she had bright pink socks on up to here and a mini skirt. She was a Cambridge graduate, super smart woman, and that sort of set the tone. And she was like, "Look, this is the challenge of our generation. We need to learn about coal-fired power stations. We need to tackle this." So. I had the most incredible time working with this team of creative, crazy solutionists at Friends of the Earth in the UK. We led a campaign for a climate change law. And I was really interested in Parliament, and I was really interested in climate. So I ended up leading this campaign, which became law in the UK and has now been replicated in 60 countries around the world. And through that, I actually met my now boss, Ed Miliband. And I remember the moment going to see him, and I sat on a sofa, and I was like, there's this thing, it's really bad. It's going to be, it's called climate change. And for anybody who knows Ed Miliband, he's got quite an expressive face. And I can still remember his face being like, ah! Anyway, I went to work with Ed. I left Friends of the Earth. We got the campaign through, and he said, right, come on, you need to come in and help me. So he set up the first Department for Energy and Climate Change, and I went to work there and had a great time. After a bit, I sort of thought, I need to go and do something else. But like I'm sure many people in this room, certainly Solitaire, it is a bit like the Hotel California. You can't really, you never get away from it in a way. So I left for a bit, tried to do some other things, but then decided it was time to come back. And I decided to run for Parliament. I knew that I wanted the Labour government to get in, it aligned, I've been in the Labour Party for 20 years, it's my values, it's where I think we can make a difference, but also I knew I had the skill set to do that. And so I ran on saying, this is my thing. Climate is my thing. I want to do it here. I want to prove it here. I've got a theory of change. And so I got into Parliament last year, and then 2 weeks ago got offered the job of Climate Minister. So it's been a...
Yeah, that deserves a clap. That deserves a big clap.
But, you know, all it is a platform. Like, all it is a platform. And it's a platform, and what we're going to do with that. And we are at a dangerous moment. We're at a really dangerous moment. But, you know, what do we meet danger with? And look, when I grew up and when you were talking, my dad used to say to me always, I'd come in and he'd say, what's your problem? And he'd be like, what's your solution? And he would always be like, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. And so, you know, that is my mindset. It's always like, what are the solutions to these problems? And so I think we meet this moment with solutions, with positivity, and I'm determined to try and bring everything to bear and work with you to do that.
I love that so much. And I will say, when I was little, I read a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Has anyone read that book? And there's a quote in that book, which is, there's no such thing as a problem without a gift in its hands. You seek problems because you seek gifts. And I do believe every problem has the potential for outrageous solution if we play in that. And so, first of all, Anna, note to self, you could have a character who worked at a nonprofit and then becomes the PM, just saying.
I feel like we're writing a story about your life, basically. You're like, I am sitting right now, I'm a writer on The Diplomat. I get to tell stories with Alysia and other incredible actors like her about people like Katie. It's really a privilege to be here.
Yeah, so Anna, tell us a little bit about your story. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Anna.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Anna who grew up in New York, grew up in Brooklyn, was a bookworm, lover of theater. I ended up working for a woman who we both know, incredible writer, incredible person named Deborah Kahn. And she was developing a show. She wasn't quite sure what it was going to be. At a certain point, I remember being at the kitchen table with her, and she said, it's maybe going to be in an embassy, something about people, all the people who are running around trying to solve problems. And this was a little bit before COVID. At the time I was her assistant and researcher, COVID began, which was a very difficult time. It was also the first Trump administration. There were a lot of really talented people who had been working in this field and in the field of diplomacy who suddenly found themselves at home with a little bit of time to spare. Definitely the world's loss, but our gain, we got to talk to a lot of them. We sort of interviewed maybe 60 people that first chunk to try to get a sense of what this work is, and then try to make a TV show about it. The first season, there was a certain point where I slipped a script that I wrote for the show to Deborah, and she liked it, and then I became a writer on the show. And now we are writing season 4. Season 3 is coming out in just a couple weeks, which is very exciting. And it is a real megaphone. It is a platform. Like you said, it is a show that gets seen in 86 countries, that people watch for tens of millions of hours. And it's a megaphone that's also intimate because people watch it, you know, in their bedroom, their living room, their bathroom, on their commute. So it's really exciting to talk about how social change gets smuggled in or becomes part of that storytelling.
So beautiful. And I want to turn to you, Katie, and say, if Anna could tell any story about climate right now, what would you imagine that to be? What story would you like more people to know or to champion at this moment?
That's a great question, and it's. I feel like I'm going into a sweet shop. So I think it's around how our lives can be better in a low-carbon world. And sorry, the language around that is not
That's great.
Totally accessible. But for me, like, a lot of the things that is wrong with our society and has led us to a place where people are less happy and less healthy, less connected, like, a lot of the solutions that we talk about will allow us to sort of, it will leapfrog where we are. And I mean, in some ways, and for some people, a lot of people don't like change. I actually love change. Yeah. So I'm conscious of aiming off for that. But in terms of, look, in some ways, it's very simple. It's, you turn on your kettle and the electricity at the end, is it clean, is it dirty, fine, whatever. But actually, this is a real opportunity that, I think there are multiple crises going on, whether it's health, as I say, whether it's happiness, whether it's around well-being, where actually us taking a step and a pause and thinking, how do we envisage that new society that we could create with a more restored nature, where we actually enjoy our land and countryside, where we actually, potentially go a tiny bit slower, but at the same time, be grateful. I'm so grateful for all of the energy that we can get from the sun and from the wind and from the waves, but it's so clever and we can bring people into that. So, and I think, and pride in place. There's a real pride in place, and I think, look, it's a massive challenge, but actually as humans, it's so exciting to have a challenge. It's so exciting. There is so many new opportunities for young people. Yeah. I was talking to a big wind company last night, and they were saying the amount of people that apply for their apprenticeships is off the scale, and they're going from, and where I come from in the north of England, there's various parts of the country that have been pretty run down for a long time. This is an opportunity to reinvest in those communities and see how actually we can use this transition to sort of reignite ourselves, our countries, our sense of place, and our sense of pride. So I'm very patriotic, but I also, as I say, I'm broadly really excited, because I think that a lot of the things that we can do will have so many other co-benefits, is an awful word, but so many other things that will make us feel healthier and happier, and ultimately, isn't that what we're all about? And I think fundamentally that's my job, is to have, make sure that people are secure, but also to improve their health and happiness.
I love that so much. And because all good storytelling has to have conflict, there will have to be a character that is trying not to have that happen. But in all seriousness, one of my favorite books happens to be by a friend of mine called Long Path by Ari Wallach. I don't know if anyone's read it, but he talks about being the best ancestor for future generations, and part of that is the stories we tell. And one of the things he really talks about is the importance of telling protopias, which is not a dystopia and is not a utopia. So it's what is a livable future that we can live into. And when we tell those stories, and that's what I hear from you, it's like the joy, the glee of, oh my God, we're not harming our planet, we're not harming our own health. We're living in this really positive world, and we're also aware of the challenges, On the flip side, I would say to you, as a writer in America at the moment, imagine Katie was someone who worked in policy in America right now. What would you want to tell? What story would you want to tell them?
Wow. Well, I think what we're trying to do, we have been struggling as a TV show to figure out how to tell a foreign policy story right now in America, where we've always been writing the show knowing that it'll come out about 2 years after we start writing it. And so we're trying to have it make sense and seem like it's taking place.
That deserves a big laugh in this moment.
What will be happening in 2 years? I don't know. None of us know. There's also a real struggle about how much the TV show should be reflecting how dark things have gotten, and how much it should be enshrining a kind of optimism. And just to, I was sort of sparking to what you were talking about, because I think there's great value in kind of celebrating and honoring the essential work of diplomats supporting the global alliance system, politicians fighting for climate change, things that aren't necessarily happening in the real world in some of the ways that we want them to be, but that can be, that we can inspire another generation to be doing that. I mean, there are so many examples. Will and Grace and how it influenced gay marriage in America.
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy, how it influenced female surgeons in America. I mean, I think the stories that we can be telling, the sort of proto-utopias we can be creating, can actually be tools for change.
I love that. And I'm going to totally pitch something out of the blue right now, which is I work with the Plastic Pollution Coalition, and one of the things we talk about is flipping the script on plastic and taking plastic out of sets, not just off screen, but on screen. So a great example of that is Hacks, where they wrote it in and it became a really funny thing of not using plastic water bottles. So I invite the Diplomat to think about that too, in this public space that's really inappropriate for me to say, but think about it.
Tyler with her tote bag.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Like those kind of things I do think make a difference, because I do feel like the characters on the Diplomat are very heroic in a way. They're modern protopian heroes. There are a lot of people really trying to do the best that they can in really, really, really extreme circumstance, like you probably experience on a regular basis. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to are there any questions from the audience? Yeah. I was told there would be a mic. Is there a mic? You seem to have a beautiful projecting voice. I think you can handle it. There we go.
Perfect, thank you. Big thank you for this has been amazing. Oh, sorry? Oh, Stan, sorry. As an ex-civil servant turned screenwriter, this is very in my wheelhouse. I'm very interested to know how you do climate storytelling without turning off audiences by being overly explicit, particularly as people are beginning to align their entertainment watching with their political beliefs. But then also how you balance that with making it explicit enough that the message actually does get through. So how do you find that equilibrium?
Yeah, it is a great question. It is very hard. It's a cliche that it's hard to write stories about climate change, and nobody wants to be sort of patronizing to their audience. If you talk down to them, they're going to just turn the thing off. I also think that there's sort of a sense that in order to talk about climate, you have to have it be a show that it is about climate, and I don't think that's actually the case. Like, of course, you can write a really compelling script that is a disaster flick or that is about people who are working in climate policy, but I think increasingly, if you're just doing a realistic drama about the world, climate will be part of that story. This is a tiny example, but on Succession, great show, there was a storyline about one of the characters fearing that his grandfather would give his inheritance to Greenpeace, darkly comic storyline, after which Greenpeace saw a huge up in their donations and in their website visits. And so I don't know, I think that maybe if you're writing a story about the world that you're actually seeing, it will be a climate story. That can be a way to make it human and lived in and relatable and not patronizing and still tell something really urgent to its audience.
That's such a beautiful, eloquent answer. Thank you. And I also want to add, I develop and produce, and I'm developing a half-hour comedy right now. Has nothing to do with climate, and my daughter in it is 12 and a climate doomsdayer, and she's building a safe room in our house. And it's a way to make it funny, but over the course of the show, she'll actually get super activated as a climate activist and really do things that empower her more than the doomsday room. So that's the kind of storytelling. It's a half-hour comedy, and we don't talk about it. We don't call it a climate comedy, but that's the way we incorporated it. I saw more questions.
Hi there. My name's Charlotte. I work at B Lab. We do B Corp certification, which is like a corporate sustainability certification, but we also advocate for policy change. And I'd love to hear from each of you, like, what do you think is the feedback loop and the order of operations between changing the culture of like what people demand and believe is possible versus changing the rules in policy that force them to do something differently?
Who wants to start?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go, but I'm just going to be cheeky and just go a little bit on your question as well, because I think there's something really interesting here about like being, truthful and it being really miserable or like too light and fluffy. I guess there's a different dimension that I'm worried about, because I think we have a real problem with being quite binary in this world, do you know what I mean? And we are like, you are right, you are wrong, do you know what I mean? And the message is right and wrong. And like, we ain't getting anywhere with that. And also, like, what we're going to do is break that down. And I think, like, I'm not a writer, and I'm much better at saying this, but the best characters are when they've got complexity. And that is human beings, isn't it? You start off being like, do you like them? Do you not like them? Oh, I like that bit about them, but that bit's a bit awkward. And like, that is the beauty of human beings. Do you know what I mean? Like, you will have some answers and you will have some good views and, and that's like the beauty of nature as well. And so I guess like we need to be able to bring complexity or hold that nuance and that complexity in the argument, because that is being lost. And that means that, and I think there's a whole piece around that. So like, I just wanted to say that because I felt it's missing. In terms of policy, like I think it's about good ideas as well. Like good ideas come from like creative things, and it could be that we talk about change and David Attenborough and his plastic straws. God, that Blue Planet literally changed the world, in terms of plastic straws. Not in every country anymore, but, in most countries, it became a thing and all kids got involved and whatever. So that was now it was an idea that came to bear through culture, At the same time, like at the moment in the UK, we're having a bit of an open conversation about smartphones, which is happening everywhere. Adolescents, obviously, we've talked about came out of Netflix, but they came in to talk to us at the House of Parliament. Like, that's in a way, I think the progress we will make is a co-creation, because I think we started the conversation, we have people talking about it in Parliament, and then we'll have the adolescents. So there's a co-creation. When we did the Climate Change Act, that was 100% a sort of geeky, nerdy policy idea that we then went and said to Tom York of Radiohead, will you help us sell it? So I think, I don't think there's one route to it. I think a good idea will come up, but co-creation and collaboration is the way to supercharge things.
I love that. Well, do you want to go? Okay. I will. We're out of time, it seems. But I will just add, to me, I love what you said about that, the complexity of humanity and the complexity of our world. And I don't think it's one or the other, but the big piece of it that's everything is imagination. And the most important thing when I think about policy, when I think about art, when I think about storytelling, I think the most important thing we can do right now is keep our minds open, stay curious and wondering. And sometimes culture does that, and sometimes even just watching a very banal TV show can actually help us open our imagination. Sometimes meditation can do that. Sometimes sex can do that. There are many things that can open our imagination. And in this moment, I think it's the most important thing that we not buy into doom stories and stay curious. So on that, we're out of time. Thank you for having us.